Welcome to Weather Extra. I'm First Alert Meteorologist Jillian Johnson. Now that we're in the month of February, the official numbers for January are in. To recap what we saw in Central Texas as we kicked off the new year, we bring in First Alert Meteorologist Sean Bellafury, who gets Weather Extra started for us this week. Sean.
January 2025 started out cold and stayed cold for the majority of the month. As we take a look at the high temperatures at the Waco Regional Airport, where all the climate records are kept, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 days out of 31 with a temperature that was above normal. But the vast majority of days were cooler than normal, including with one day just getting to freezing. That was on January 20th, Inauguration Day, and of course Martin Luther King Jr. Day. The average high in January, 59.1 degrees, but we were only at 54.9, 4.2 degrees below normal. That 4.2 degree temperature difference between the average and what actually happened also rang true for our low temperatures as well. We nearly spent 3 full weeks, not only with below normal average, or below normal temperatures rather, but we almost spent 3 full weeks with temperatures at or below freezing. Were it not for Friday the 17th with a temperature of 37 degrees, we would have had a 3-week-long streak of those temperatures at or below freezing. Now, the average high in January over the course of the past 5 years, pay attention to the colors. The color code's going to transition into the next graphic as well. 54.9 degrees is where we're at the Waco Airport. That is, of course, significantly below the average high. But in 2021, 2022, and 2023, we saw warmer than normal temperatures. Last year was cold, but only colder than this year by 0.2 degrees. The average low, however, still in second place. We had an average low below freezing. Last year was just a little bit above freezing. 2022 was well below freezing, but just in the same way, we were well below average for those morning temperatures as well. Rainfall was also in very short supply for the vast majority of the month, partially thanks to all of that colder air that was in place. But just before we flipped the calendar over into February, we did see a decent soaking, almost 2 inches of rain at the Waco Airport. Even higher totals than that in some spots, giving us a slight bump up above normal, a 0.09-inch rainfall surplus for the first month of the year. Now, what does February look like? Well, the monthly temperature outlook across the country kind of shows what we've been experiencing to start the month. The colder air staying up to the north, warmer air to the south and to the east, as these cold fronts try to, but most likely don't, get into central Texas. As we take a look at the precipitation outlook, we are in the equal chances area, maybe a little below, maybe a little bit above normal precipitation, but you can see the higher totals up towards the Midwest. That is where the majority of this month's cold fronts are expected to blast through too. Reporting in the studio, Sean Bellafury, KWTX News 10.
As you just heard from Sean, the outlook for February calls for warmer than normal temperatures, and that's exactly what we saw this past week. High temperatures every single day last week ran between 15 to 25 degrees above normal. We even managed to tie and break some record highs. Many mornings last week began foggy and cloudy with low temperatures starting out warmer than what our normal high should be, which is in the low 60s. And afternoon temperatures climbed into the mid 70s to mid 80s every day. Talk about a crazy change from what we saw in January. While we haven't seen beneficial rainfall so far this month, the rain towards the end of last year and now to the start of 2025 has improved our drought conditions across central Texas. For an update on the latest drought monitor, we bring in First Alert Meteorologist C.D. Finley.
Well, we've definitely seen a lot of changes with the drought monitor over the last few months. Taking a look back all the way to the end of October 2024, there was a pretty decently sized area of severe drought here in central Texas, and at this point in time we'd been dry for at least a little while. Fast forward all the way to the end of 2024, we kind of whittled away at that drought just a little bit, bringing that severe drought size back down to well, mostly just the southern portions of our area here in central Texas, with most of us seeing a moderate drought conditions across the area. Taking a look back at where we were seeing the rainfall amounts during this time, well, again, this was that period here where we were barely seeing any rainfall whatsoever. The end of October didn't even really see an inch of rainfall, if at all, barely even 3/4. But we started to see that pick up a little bit more towards the end of the year. By the end of December, we had finished pretty close to normal for monthly rainfall totals, that is, for the first time in a while. I mean, practically for the first time since May, pretty much, when we had well above normal amounts of rainfall across the area. Now, Fast forward even more to January 2025, starting off the new year with our first month of rainfall totals. First time since May of 2024 that we could have or can say we were officially above normal. Not by a lot. We're talking about maybe a tenth of an inch or so, but still can't officially say we were above normal. And that's all thanks to a buzzer beater at the end of the month. 1.5 inches of rainfall across central Texas at the very least on Thursday, January 30th there. So definitely, while most of January was dry, definitely saw those totals pick up there within the last few days of the month. And what has that done for the drought monitor so far up to this point as we start February? Well, that severe drought has whittled away even more, mainly for areas all the way down towards Burnett and Georgetown. That's where the severe drought is being experienced, where meanwhile some portions of northern central Texas aren't even experiencing drought conditions at all. So we've already whittled away at those drought conditions a little bit more, and hopefully we continue to do so as we head further into 2025. Of course, as we head towards the springtime, typically do see a little bit more rainfall, with those average totals continuing to increase from February onward.
As we've discussed on previous episodes of Weather Extra, throughout the month of January, Southern California dealt with numerous raging wildfires. But thankfully, as the calendar switched over to February, rain started to fall. A pair of winter storms known as atmospheric river events brought much needed rainfall to the Golden State over the past week, which helped put out the flames in Southern California and prevented new fires from starting up. Now, the heaviest rain and snow from these atmospheric river events fell in Northern California last week, creating additional devastation for even more residents across the state. Some areas in Northern California picked up more than a foot of rain throughout the past week. San Francisco recorded nearly 3 inches of rain on Tuesday alone, which broke a 138-year-old record that stood since 1887. And across the higher elevations of the Sierra Nevada mountain range, 1 to 2 feet of snow fell, which created dangerous driving conditions for many. Unfortunately, in California, where there is heavy rain, there are often mudslides, and that's exactly what happened in Sonoma County last week, where one home went crashing down into a river. Take a look.
And as we all know, Russian River is a beautiful place, especially during the summer, but when we get this heavy rain, it's very unpredictable.
It was about 12:30 when a highway patrol officer responded to a report of a hillside giving way, and that officer watched as the land and trees below West Side Road went sliding down towards the Russian River, and one home went right along with it.
What's going on?
Within minutes, rescue teams from across Sonoma County had descended on this narrow street and eventually down to the debris below. And for a time, there were rescue teams patrolling the water, but eventually word came that the home was empty.
No, we checked with the property owner and there was nobody inside the house.
I thought it was like just brush or a tree sliding down a hill. And I didn't know it was a whole house. And then the transformer popped and that sounded like a gun going off.
One neighbor just a couple doors away said he did not realize exactly what had happened until someone told him to go look at the hillside from the bridge.
They said there was a mudslide. I didn't know it was a house in the river.
Oh, look, it's hitting the tree.
Oh my gosh.
Others watched in disbelief as a large portion of the home made its way down the river, and the county is just now beginning to assess what comes next at the site of the slide.
Right now, it's kind of one of those, we're still trying to determine, we're trying to get all our resources up here. We did evacuate the people up on this hillside because obviously there's a landslide, and we're just predicting another landslide to occur, and we want to get people out of harm's way.
Local meteorologists in Bodega Bay, California, which is located about an hour and a half north of San Francisco, had an important mission last week as those atmospheric river events caused torrential rain and snow. For more on the research they conducted while the storms hit, here's Mary Lee.
I've just been alternating between those two.
Adolfo Lopez and Subin Yoon's mission here in Bodega Bay is to capture data on our impressive atmospheric river.
So at this point, just open up the helium.
Every 3 hours, they're blowing up these weather balloons and attaching GPS radio sondes, sending them straight into the storm.
They'll give you kind of a picture of the atmosphere at the time, kind of taking a snapshot right at that time. And so we do it successively every 3 hours. and we're going to see kind of the storm come through the area.
They're measuring the magnitude and direction of the storm, collecting crucial weather data like temperature, pressure, wind, and relative humidity.
So we're just gonna walk this way just because we wanted to clear like all the buildings. Yeah, you don't want it to hit anything. Like I've had balloons like somehow it starts unwinding and it gets caught on a power line. 3, 2, 1, go.
The weather balloons and GPS radio sondes can measure all levels of the atmosphere up to around 80,000 feet high, providing real-time weather data every second. This information is then sent to the National Weather Service. In fact, the weather data collected here is used to update and improve weather models to forecast this storm.
We're doing this for a bigger cause, so it is, yeah, it's also like, it's amazing that I can be part of it, but it's also like, I'm so glad to be part of it, and that I feel like I'm doing something that's so relevant.
So for me, it's just changed my whole outlook on like, you think of weather and you're like, is it raining today or is it sunny today? And it goes so much beyond that.
For Subin and Adolfo, knowing they're working to help forecast and understand atmospheric rivers that impact all of us gives higher meaning to what they do.
Straight ahead on Weather Extra, it's been more than 4 months since Helene struck the southeastern United States. Local residents there are continuing to rebuild that process. They're waiting for help from the government. We hear directly from those impacted when we come back. Back in late September, Hurricane Helene made landfall in northwestern Florida as a powerful Category 4 storm with maximum winds of 140 miles per hour. Helene moved further inland, causing catastrophic destruction from Georgia to Tennessee and into North Carolina. 42 trillion gallons of rain fell over the southeastern U.S. during the storm. Some parts of North Carolina picked up over 30 inches of rain in just a few days. Helene caused an estimated $78 billion in damage. Unfortunately, this hurricane will be remembered as the deadliest to strike the mainland United States since Hurricane Katrina back in 2005. At least 230 people were killed because of this storm. And while it's been more than 4 months since Helene devastated parts of North Carolina and Tennessee, many people are still waiting for promised help from the state and federal governments. But in the meantime, they're helping one another. Dave Malkoff reports from Newland, North Carolina.
Every careful cut and skillful saw line Jeff Hughes makes will soon get buried.
I know who's going to be going in this one because he's already spoke for it.
But there's no easy way for the woodworker to get that casket to the funeral home. The bridge he and his neighbors rely on to get to the main road was washed away. Helene damaged or destroyed at least 130 private bridges in Avery County, North Carolina. With no bridge, he has to strap it to an ATV, drive it upstream, and then carry it over a footbridge.
You're looking at a good 45 minutes longer now than it would have been with the bridge,
The town doesn't own it, the state doesn't own it. Replacing the bridge will cost him and his 4 neighbors at least $100,000. Hughes received $3,000 from FEMA, and the bridge was not insured.
So this bridge, one of our volunteers put together with telephone poles.
Robin Ollis and her volunteers started building temporary private bridges right after the storm using donations, but it's not enough.
Our hope is that other large organizations such as Samaritan's Purse, Red Cross, the larger organizations like that would come in and donate money on top of FEMA, and then we look to local charitable foundations to help us bridge the gap.
Just over the North Carolina border, volunteers turned a semi-truck trailer into a bridge, the only way to access Pogee, Tennessee. It's since been replaced with railroad cars.
Just mountain ingenuity?
Mountain ingenuity.
Yeah.
The people who live here, like Alex Matthews, have no idea if or when they'll get a permanent bridge.
The people here were just less significant than others. Well, I don't
feel that way?
Yes, because a lot of places get fixed a lot faster than we do. We're last on the list for everything.
In North Carolina, Helene damaged more than 7,000 private bridges, roads, and culverts. They are a critical part of the infrastructure here. but right now the state isn't providing money for repairs. And so, just days ago, volunteers built a temporary bridge in front of Jeff Hughes' home, helping to keep his casket-making business alive. For Eye on America, Dave Malkoff in Newland, North Carolina.
Last October, NASA launched a mission aimed to see if the ingredients for life exist on Jupiter's ice-covered moon, Europa. Coming up next on Weather Extra is this week's Degrees of Science, where Brady Taylor had the chance to talk with the lead scientist for one of the instruments aboard the Europa Clipper spacecraft. We'll be right back with a listen into their conversation.
Dr. Blankenship, I guess before we talk about your exact instrument, what exactly is this Europa Clipper mission, and why is NASA doing it?
Europa is the moon of Jupiter. It's the second moon of Jupiter. It's the smoothest thing in the solar system, and everybody wondered why. And when they got there and took some photos, it was very clear it was ice covered, and the ice was substantially cracked. It didn't have many craters, which means that whatever was going on at Europa was dynamic. You think of the Earth's moon, there are craters everywhere. Europa has very few craters, which means that ice surface is overturning. So the hypothesis was that it was underlain by an ocean. And so if you think about looking for life in the solar system, if you look at Earth, you've got a rocky mantle, you've got an ocean, and every once in a while we're completely, 500 million years ago, we were completely ice covered. And so, oddly enough, Europa looks a lot like Earth 500 million years ago. And that's when life got interesting on Earth. So if you're going to go look for life in the solar system, going to Europa, an ice-covered ocean world, is the obvious thing to do.
You're one of the 9 instruments, and you're the lead investigator for the REASON instrument. So I love NASA and all the acronyms. So what exactly does REASON stand for?
It's radar for Europa assessment and sounding, ocean to near surface. What we do, we run a polar geophysics group here as well. So I've spent my entire career flying airplanes and helicopters over the Earth's ice sheets. And so we had developed technologies that pretty much didn't exist in the planetary science community. We are able to basically explain to the planetary community how to look into the ice on Europa. The ice on Earth that we sound is like up to almost 3 miles thick, and the ice on Europa is hypothesized to be 10 to 15 miles thick.
What are you able to see through the ice, and what has it helped y'all to learn about the ice shelf down there?
It's astonishing. It's if you use the right frequency of radar, which hilariously is 60 megahertz, which doesn't mean anything to you, but if you used to work on channel 4 back in the old days, that was 60 megahertz. So it's the TV broadcast frequency. If you use 60 megahertz and you fly it around Europa, it's the same frequency we use for the polar ice sheets on Earth. We can basically see everything. On the surface of Europa, it's minus several hundred degrees Fahrenheit. But down at the ice-ocean interface, 10 miles down, the temperature is exactly the same as it is on Earth. The temperature, the pressure, and we think that the salinity of the ocean on Europa is maybe even a little fresher than Earth. On Earth, we see layers, but it's kind of weird because, when you fly over an ice sheet on Earth, basically it's snowfall every year piling up. So there are layers that represent each year's snowfall. That doesn't happen on Europa. There's no atmosphere. And so essentially what happens is that the snowfall is from the bottom up because the ocean circulation will make the water cold, and then ice particles will form, and then those ice particles are buoyant, and so they float up and stick to the bottom of the ice shell. So essentially, we're looking at an upside-down Earth.
Y'all spent over a decade working on this. This spacecraft is launched and on its way, but it's 1.8 billion miles before it gets to where it needs to and doesn't arrive till April of 2030. So I'm guessing you're not just twiddling your thumbs waiting on it. What goes on now between now and when the Clipper mission gets there?
Yeah, this year was kind of exciting. We're the biggest instrument on the mission by far. The solar arrays on the Clipper mission are each the size of a half basketball court. So then our antennas are hooked to the edge of those solar arrays. And our low frequency antennas are 50 feet long, you know, and the high frequency antennas are 10 or 12 feet long. And so there's 6 antennas hanging off of those solar arrays. What we had to do, we couldn't launch with those things deployed. So we weren't really fully assembled until after launch. You know, at launch plus 25 days, it was all hands on deck to get those antennas deployed. And we have managed to actually turn the radar on and put power on those antennas. And so that's going great. The next thing we have to do is we're putting a flight plan in right now to go to Mars, and we'll be flying by Mars on March 1st. But that'll be the first time we can prove that we can put power on our antennas, bounce off of a planet, and see that power come back to us. Then we have a radio telescope next to Death Valley in California, and then we'll be transmitting back to that radio telescope so that we can characterize the beam pattern. And then sometime at the end of the summer, all of the instruments come on, and we discover if anybody is making noise at a frequency that matters to us. So it's going to be a busy year.
To hear more about the Europa Clipper mission and this week's Degrees of Science, scan the QR code on your screen to watch on YouTube or go to KWTX.com/Degrees of Science. Weather Extra will be right back. Welcome back to Weather Extra. The solar industry has exploded over the past decade, and that includes putting panels on farmland to capture electricity. Maintaining the land underneath those panels can be a pricey proposition, but now there are workers doing it for cheap. CBS News correspondent Jason Allen explains.
About an hour outside of Austin, Texas, in the tiny town of Buckholz, sits the 5th largest solar project in the U.S., capable of creating up to 900 million watts of power. And the panels soaking up all that sun are getting an assist from new helpers willing to work for food.
We want to be good stewards of the land. One of the challenges to that is the very difficult problem of how do we effectively control vegetation management.
SB Energy found an answer: sheep. The animals naturally graze the land, keeping vegetation from growing too high.
As this industry continues to grow, so will the demand for sheep.
Business is booming. You can find sheep on solar farms in about 27 states, from Texas to Minnesota to Massachusetts. Companies say it's more cost-effective than bringing in mowers, and it's environmentally friendly.
The sheep naturally eat the grass, so it benefits them. So instead of us just mechanically mowing it, we are lowering the carbon footprint.
Historically been a reluctance to transition from gas mowing to livestock as vegetation maintenance. We're starting to see wide-scale adoption.
The National Renewable Energy Laboratory says there are currently about 60 solar grazing projects in the U.S., and that number is expected to grow. Jason Allen, CBS News, Dallas.
Well, that's all we have for you on this week's episode of Weather Extra. For the upcoming work week, we say goodbye to that early springtime warmth that we had this past week and welcome back some rain chances and also that winter feel. Have a great week, everyone. We'll see you right back here next weekend.